The spring of 1944 held the fate of the world in its hands. Across the English Channel, Adolf Hitler's Atlantic Wall stretched from Norway to the southern coast of France, a vast, fortified spine of concrete and steel, gun emplacements and minefields, barbed wire and entrenched divisions built over 4 years to hold back the inevitable day when the Allies would come. And the Allies were coming. Every senior German commander knew it. Hitler knew it. The only question that mattered, was where and when. Those 2 words, where and when. They were the most valuable pieces of military intelligence in the history of warfare. The men who held that secret understood precisely what it was worth. They understood that if those 2 words reached the wrong ears before the morning of June 6, 1944, the largest amphibious assault ever attempted would sail directly into a prepared and waiting enemy. The soldiers packed into those landing craft, more than 156,000 of them on the first day alone, would not be storming a surprise defense. They would be walking into a killing ground. The planners estimated the casualty difference between a surprised enemy and a fully prepared one in the tens of thousands. Some estimates ran higher. The secret had to hold. It had to hold through months of preparation, through the movement of millions of men and mountains of equipment, through the chatter of 1 million daily conversations, through the ambitions and the carelessness and the simple human fallibility of an Allied command stretched across 2 continents. And on the night of April 27, 1944, in the cold black waters of Lyme Bay off the southern coast of England, that secret came closer to catastrophic exposure than almost anyone outside the highest levels of Allied command was permitted to know. Operation Tiger was the code name for a full-scale rehearsal of the Utah beach landing conducted along Slapton Sands in Devon, a stretch of coastline whose geography resembled the beaches of Normandy closely enough that Allied planners had chosen it as the primary training ground for the American forces assigned to the invasion's western flank. Everything about Tiger was designed to replicate the real thing: the naval bombardment, the timing of the landing craft, the chaos of men and machines hitting a beach under simulated fire. Thousands of American soldiers needed to practice the mechanics of an amphibious assault before they attempted the genuine article against a genuine enemy. The cost of failure on the actual day would be measured in lives. The rehearsal was serious, elaborate, and ruthlessly realistic. It was also, on that April night, fatally exposed. A convoy of 8 American LST's landing ship tanks, the large flat-bottomed vessels designed to deliver vehicles and troops directly onto a beach, was moving through Lyme Bay in the early hours of April 28, when German E-boats, the fast torpedo craft that operated out of Cherbourg, found them. The E-boats had slipped past the British naval screen in the darkness. Drawn to the convoy by radio traffic they had intercepted. They struck without warning. 2 LSTs were sunk. A third was badly damaged. In the cold water of the English Channel, 749 American soldiers and sailors died, more Americans than would be killed on Utah Beach on D-Day itself. It was a disaster. It was covered up immediately and entirely. And it was not the worst of it. Among the dead and the missing that night were 10 United States Army officers. Not simply officers. Officers who carried bigot clearance. That word bigot was not an insult. It was a classification. A level of secrecy that sat above top secret in the hierarchy of Allied intelligence, reserved specifically for those who had been cleared to know the full details of Operation Overlord, the invasion date, the landing sites, the order of battle, the deception plans, everything. 10 men with complete knowledge of the most sensitive military operation in history were unaccounted for in the waters of Lyme Bay, and the terror that gripped Allied command in the hours that followed was not grief, though grief came too. It was the terror of a question that had no tolerable answer. Were those men dead, or had German forces pulled them from the water? Dwight D. Eisenhower, Supreme Commander of the Allied Expeditionary Force, was told immediately. The order that followed was as stark as any issued in the entire European theater. Find those 10 men. Find them before the Germans do. Every available vessel was redirected. Every body pulled from the channel was examined and identified. The recovery operation ran through the night and into the following days, with an urgency that the surviving soldiers, told only that there had been an accident, could not understand and were not permitted to ask about. All 10 were found dead. Their bodies had not been recovered by the Germans. Their knowledge died with them in the black water of Lyme Bay. The secret held, but it had been a matter of current and chance, and the particular geography of where men drowned and where bodies surfaced, nothing more. The entire architecture of the most important military operation in history had rested, for those hours, on the cold arithmetic of where the tide carried the dead. The disaster at Lyme Bay was not the only moment that spring when the secret trembled on the edge of exposure. 6 days before the Exercise Tiger convoy was hit at a party in London's Claridge's Hotel, a senior American officer made a mistake that ended his career before the invasion he was supposed to support had even begun. Major General Henry J. F. Miller was the commanding general of the 9th Air Force's Service Command, responsible for the supply and logistics infrastructure that would support American air operations over Normandy. At that party, surrounded by Allied officers and their guests, Miller grew loose with frustration about supply bottlenecks and careless with the most classified information in the world. He said it plainly. The invasion, he told those around him, would come before June 15th, the date, in a room full of people, in London, a city that Allied counterintelligence knew was penetrated at multiple levels by German intelligence networks, a city where a careless word in the wrong company traveled faster than any dispatch rider. The report reached Eisenhower within hours. Eisenhower's response was immediate and without mercy. Miller was relieved of command, stripped from major general to his permanent rank of colonel. Shipped back to the United States in disgrace, his career finished on the eve of the operation he had spent years preparing to support. Eisenhower wrote afterward that he would have court-martialed Miller if the public attention of a trial had not risked drawing precisely the kind of scrutiny to the invasion's timeline that the whole episode had endangered. One conversation, one moment of carelessness, one man who forgot, in the warmth of a London party, the weight of what he was carrying. And still the threats came. In the weeks that followed, a package of documents was found at the main post office in Chicago, addressed in a way that had no legitimate military explanation, containing papers related to Overlord. The package had been sent through ordinary civilian mail. Investigators traced it, examined it, assessed the damage, and concluded with enormous relief that it had not been opened by hostile hands. A clerical error, catastrophically dangerous, contained by the accident of interception. Then there was the crossword. In the weeks before June 6th, the Daily Telegraph of London published a series of crossword puzzles whose answers, one after another, included the exact code names of the most sensitive operations in the Overlord planning: Utah, Omaha, Mulberry, Neptune, Overlord itself. British intelligence descended on the puzzle's compiler, a schoolteacher named Leonard Daw, with the full weight of MI5. They interrogated him. They examined his sources, his methods, his contacts. They found nothing. Daw had no connection to German intelligence. He was a schoolteacher who set crossword puzzles. The words had found their way into his grids through channels so innocuous overheard conversations. A student who had picked up the language of the military camps nearby, that the coincidence was essentially impossible to distinguish from deliberate signaling. He was released. The crosswords were assessed as genuine coincidence, but the assessment took time, and during that time, Allied counterintelligence could not be certain. Beneath all of these near misses, beneath the drowned officers and the careless general and the suspicious crosswords and the lost documents, ran an operation that most people in the spring of 1944 knew nothing about and would not learn about for decades: the double-cross system. Formally designated XX by British intelligence, it was the mechanism by which virtually every German spy operating in Britain had been captured, recruited, and transformed into a controlled conduit of deliberate misinformation fed directly into the German intelligence apparatus. The double agents at the center of this system had been operating for years, building credibility with their German handlers by passing real intelligence carefully chosen to be valuable enough to be believed, but not damaging enough to matter. By the spring of 1944, they were the most trusted sources in the German intelligence network, and they were all under Allied control. The most consequential of them, a Spaniard known to British intelligence by the code name Garbo, his real name, Juan Pujol Garcia, had constructed an entirely fictitious network of sub-agents whose reports reached the highest levels of German command. Hitler himself had awarded Garbo the Iron Cross, based on intelligence Garbo invented at his kitchen table in London. When the time came to protect Overlord, Garbo and his fictional network became the primary instrument through which the Allies convinced Germany that Normandy was not the real invasion, that the real landing would come at Pas de Calais, the shortest crossing of the Channel, the location every strategic calculation pointed toward, and that the Normandy landings of June 6th were merely a feint designed to draw German reserves away from the true objective. That deception, Operation Fortitude, held. It held on June 6th, when German panzer divisions that could have pushed the Allied beachhead back into the sea sat idle at Pas de Calais, waiting for an invasion that never came. It held in the days after, when Hitler overrode his own generals and refused to release the reserves, because Garbo's network reported, convincingly, that Normandy was the diversion. The deception bought days. Days that the Allied forces on the beaches used to consolidate, to expand the lodgment, to bring enough men and material ashore that the German counterattack, when it finally came, could not throw them back. The margin was not comfortable. It was not wide. On some of those beaches, on some of those first terrible hours, the outcome was genuinely uncertain. The deception made the margin possible. The double agents made the deception possible, and the double-cross system, built on patience and precision and the willingness to hold a secret for years, made the double agents possible. What holds all of these threads together is a single, sobering truth. The success of D-Day was not inevitable. It was not guaranteed by the size of the Allied force or the quality of American industry or the justice of the cause. It was contingent on secrets kept and deceptions maintained and disasters contained and careless men removed before they could do fatal damage. 1,400 soldiers died in Lime Bay, and their deaths were concealed from the public for years, not out of callousness, but because the living had to be protected. A general lost his career for a sentence spoken at a party. A schoolteacher was interrogated by British intelligence for a crossword. A Spanish double agent sat in London and wrote fictional reports that shaped Hitler's strategic decisions. Every single one of these elements had to work. Any one of them, failing at the wrong moment in the wrong way, could have unraveled everything that came after. The historian Stephen Ambrose, who devoted much of his life to the study of June 6, 1944, observed that the men who went ashore that morning were the best soldiers, the best equipped, and the best led that the United States had ever put into the field. He was right. But they were also the beneficiaries of an invisible architecture of secrecy and deception that cleared the path ahead of them, that kept the German reserves out of position and the panzer divisions waiting in the wrong place and the Atlantic Wall for those first critical hours, facing the wrong direction. The soldiers storming those beaches never knew the names of the people who made their survival fractionally more likely. Most of those people never received the recognition that the men carrying rifles received. But without them, the rifles would not have been enough. June 6, 1944 succeeded. The beachhead held. Paris was liberated by August. Germany surrendered in May of 1945. The men who planned and protected Operation Overlord in the desperate, dangerous spring before that June morning understood something that is easy to forget when we look back at the outcome and see only inevitability. They knew how fragile it all was. They knew how many things had to go right, how many people had to stay silent, how many secrets had to survive the daily erosion of human weakness and bad luck and enemy persistence. They carried that knowledge through those months with a weight that never fully left them. The secret held. The invasion succeeded. And the men who kept the secret, the officers who understood what BIGOT clearance meant and honored it with their silence, the counterintelligence officers who chased down every tremor of exposure, the double agents who built deceptions out of nothing, and the commanders who made ruthless decisions to protect the mission above everything else, those men won a victory that nobody ever put on a monument or named a beach after. Their victory was silence. And silence, in the spring of 1944, was the most powerful weapon the Allied cause possessed.